Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I am in England right now. I'm actually in Wimbledon Park area. I actually got to see the tennis stadium this morning. I'm here for the um, G.K. Chesterton 150th birthday celebration conference being hosted by Corner Cabinet Magazine and the Society of St. Pius X. Visited the Brompton Oratory yesterday. Absolutely gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. It may be, I haven't been to Rome in a really long time. I don't really remember too much about St. Peter's. I was a young boy at the time. I'll see it again this fall. For those of you who are looking to go to Italy on a pilgrimage, I'll be on a pilgrimage run by a Catholic tour company. We'll have a traditional Catholic priest with us. If you're interested, the information for that is in the description area for this podcast. But the Brompton Oratory may be the most beautiful church I've ever seen in my life. It was astounding. Every side chapel in that church could be its own beautiful, breathtaking, world-class parish church. It's so big. But anyway, I heard the news, as you all did, about Donald Trump being convicted on all counts in that sham of a court proceeding. And it's been interesting to see the reactions from people online. Of course, I'm not an American, so I'm offering an outsider's perspective. I'm a Canuck, and I'm in the UK right now, so I'm neither American nor in America. So I'm just seeing this from how people are reacting, which is how most of us see things nowadays. And it's been interesting to watch the responses, especially from people like us, like-minded, faithful, conservative-leaning, traditional-minded Catholics. And on the one hand, it's giving people a huge amount of hope, because the idea is that, well, they just gave Trump the election because his popularity is going to soar. I just saw, not that I'm advocating for anything that Andrew Tate does. I'm not a big fan of his message per se, but I just saw a tweet that he's going to give $200,000 to Trump, and people are talking about how the donations are going to be astronomical. So a lot of people are saying they just gave him the election. I think one of my friends, I think it was Enoch, shout out Enoch, I think he tweeted something like, Trump's sentence will begin January 2025 and end in January 2029, meaning his 4-year term. Other people saying, and these are all traditional Catholics, my friend Trevor Alcorn of Tridentine Brewery, shout out, best beer you can get in North America, I'll tell you that much. And he said, I knew they would never let Trump win. Why would I let it destroy my peace? And the point is that the reactions are kind of all over the map. On the one hand, it's people are rejoicing because this is what people need to sort of wake up, so to speak, and this will heighten his popularity and so forth, and the case will be overturned. On the other hand, you have people saying, well, what else would you expect? The system's completely rigged, and there's no possible way anyone's ever going to win an election that's not a communist at this point. Some people saying, what does it matter if you vote? Votes don't matter. Some people saying you got to vote. Well, I live in a country called Canada, and we have a prime minister called Justin Trudeau. And everything that Joe Biden, put it this way, as someone who spent some time in the United States, I can tell you, I love my country, and there's many good things about living in Canada. It's not as bad as it looks on the media by any means. Otherwise, I wouldn't be there. But I can tell you all the silliness that comes out of the Democrat Party. We've had that for 20 years. We have it in spades. And we have no real right-wing opposition, no kind of mega movement to speak of. Our conservative politicians are nothing like yours, which sometimes is a good thing because some of them can be kind of silly and whatever. But my point being is that the reactions are all over the place. And for some people, it's the apocalypse. And for some people, the apocalypse has already happened. And for some people, it's the rise of the Emperor Trump. It's literally everyone is all over the place about this thing. And I keep coming back to a conversation I had 4 years ago with my friend Tim Flanders at Meaning a Catholic. It was after, I think it was during the election, or it was right after the whole sham of 2020. And we were talking about how it's just not sustainable for a culture to go through a cultural revolution every 4 years. And even though I'm in Canada, or live in Canada, being in the UK right now, even though I live in Canada, we still feel it. I remember when Trump got elected in 2016, I was teaching at a Catholic school in Ontario, a high school, And the next day on the announcements, after he won, the administration had to come on the announcements and tell everybody to calm down, that everything was going to be fine. And I'm like, he's not even our president. It wasn't even a Canadian affair. It just shows you how crazy people get about this election stuff. And nothing is going to, I'm not the kind of person to say you should never vote. I'm not the kind of person to say your vote means everything. I do believe that even though there is no political solution per se, I do believe that at some level there has to be some sort of political activity. I mean, you can say all you want about the futility of a vote or whatever, but they still get in with votes. You can say all you want about the system being rigged. Well, it's not that simple. People have competing interests. People do get victories here and there that do benefit your life in some places, usually more regional, but national stuff is important as well. Fighting for the narrative is important for people, especially in this world of information warfare, this digital warfare. It's not futile to partake in the conversation or in the effort, in my opinion. I don't think it's everything. I don't think it's the solution, but I don't think it's futile. I don't think it has to be either or. Nonetheless, there is no political solution in the strict sense. The solution is the Kingship of Christ. And this is why they went after Candace Owens. This is why the very pro-Israel, very Zionist, very dispensationalist, Kabbalistically minded Daily Wire went after Candace Owens, is because she was talking about the only solution, which is the Kingship of Christ. And they know this. The enemy knows this. Donald Trump is not the next Holy Roman Emperor by any means. I think he's hilarious. I think he's a better president than Joe Biden, but he's definitely not Saint Trump. He's not King David. He's not Constantine. But the thing about Trump that they hate is that he can stand the sight of you. They know he's not the savior. They know he's not actually a good Christian. But they know that he can stand the sight of you. And that should tell you everything you need to know. The solution to the crisis is the Kingship of Christ. That's the only solution. If you look at the sort of crumbling of the West, it didn't start with 1789. It started with 1517. It didn't start with the Freemasons. It really in many ways started with 1517. And if you look at and that was the Protestant Reformation, when the church was obviously the mystical body of Christ is undefiled and indefectible, but in a perspective of Christian culture, Christendom, it was split by the Protestant Revolution. And the Protestant Revolution in many ways had its roots in the nominalistic heresies of William of Ockham. The idea that there's no natures or essences of things and you can define things the way you want. This is really the seeds of liberalism. And you find this in William of Ockham's work, where he was essentially the first thinker to advocate for something like a separation of church and state. I think, if I could offer any counsel or any advice for Americans, you have to rid yourselves, and I'm speaking as a man who lives in a place that's way further down the Marxist hellhole than the United States is. So I think I can kind of give some, almost like I'm looking back 20 years to see where you guys are now kind of thing. And you have to rid yourselves of this notion that there's this thing such as the freedom of religion or the separation of church and state or the freedom of the press or freedom of speech. These things don't exist, and they never have, and they never can exist. There's no such thing as freedom of religion. No one believes in freedom of religion. This is why when you go back to the back and forth between Archbishop Lefebvre and the Vatican, he kept saying, our church has taught that there's no freedom of religion. There never has been. This is one of the great errors of the Second Vatican Council. It's kind of ambiguous in the documents, but really it's a freedom of religion. Freedom of religion cannot exist. It cannot exist in the absolute sense. It's impossible. Because even for the person who believes in freedom of religion in the sort of liberal sense, they still believe in your right to not be harmed or killed or something like that. And many religions do things like practice human sacrifice. So you have to stop them. You can't advocate for something that is an affront to the person and to your safety because it's religion. So even a liberal doesn't really believe in freedom of religion. They believe in freedom of some religions. And they believe in freedom of some religions because they have this view that there are certain religions that are better for society, so to speak, than others. So they're okay with that. They're okay with general Christianity or Muslims who don't take it too seriously or whatever. They're definitely okay with Judaism because they need that, because it advocates for the same errors as liberals. Um, but there's no such thing as freedom of religion. You have to stop advocating for, the purity of the Constitution, because the Constitution, the reason you have this crisis right now in America is not because they're ignoring the Constitution. It's because in many ways they're taking the Constitution to its logical conclusion. The Constitution is a liberal document. In fairness to the American constitutional history, the English themselves were, and I'm in England, so I should be careful what I say, but they were obviously heretics in their Anglicanism. So their insistence on the state church of Anglicanism, although a state church is perfectly fine in Catholic theology, it was obviously a false church. So it was almost a rebellion against a rebellion, which makes it a little bit more confusing. And I have more sympathy for the American Revolution than I would say, for example, the French Revolution. But nonetheless, it's still a revolution. And a revolution always brings continual chaos. And if you look at the history of America, obviously it's been extremely prosperous, but it's never really had peace, has it? Because it's never had the kingship of Christ. Whereas we compare this to the European countries where they had the kingship of Christ through the primacy of the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church being the only real state religion, the only official one. Everything else was tolerated. There's a big difference between toleration and positive liberty. When we look at the difference between those, we see a civilization that stood for almost 2,000 years. And we see one that's been under constant threat of continual civil war for the 250 years that it's been in existence. What's happening right now is no different. As far as freedom of speech is concerned, there's no such thing as freedom of speech. You don't have the freedom to blaspheme. Now, how you police it is a very different thing. And I'm not advocating for, jackboots walking around and throwing people in jail for saying a swear word. I'm not saying that in the slightest. But not even an anarchist, and I mean that not in the colloquial sense of someone who wants to destroy things, but I mean like an anarchist of today, like an ANCAP guy. Not even a guy like that really believes in freedom of speech, because he believes in personal property, and he believes that his property is his and he has authority over that property. And he believes that if you're on his property and you say things against Christ because he's a Christian, he believes he can kick you off his property. He doesn't actually believe you have the freedom of speech. No one believes in freedom of speech. It doesn't exist. The freedom of press doesn't exist either. Nobody believes in the freedom of the press. The freedom of the press is impossible. Someone has to own it, therefore it's private, and private people will say, you can't say that in my publication. Even a government that has a policy of freedom of the press, they won't let you publish certain things that are confidential that could compromise national security or something. My point is that none of these doctrines of this Americanist view, none of them actually hold water. None of them ever work in practice for any lengthy period of time. And none of them can be brought to their logical conclusion and still be consistent when you consider all of the realities of authority and the true religion and so forth. All conservatives, but you guys really are at the forefront of this. And if there's any country that has the best shot at turning things around, in my opinion, it's the United States. That's the paradox of America, is that on the one hand, its insistence on liberty is its downfall. On the other hand, its insistence on liberty is its greatest strength. It's a very paradoxical nation. Those of you who are right-wing in America, you have to change your mindset. And I'm speaking to the whole world, but especially in America, because as I said, I think you have the best shot at actually doing something positive. You have to get it out of your minds that it's my Constitution is going to be the savior. It's not. It's the kingship of Christ. And you have to look at the thinkers of the world, the world political leaders that had success in combating revolutions. Of course, people like Franco, but another one to look at is a man named Salazar from Portugal, who followed the apparitions of Our Lady of Fatima. In fact, there's a story that the bishops of Portugal consecrated the country to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and that sort of got the communists out. There's probably a lot of truth to that. And Salazar didn't do things in a very military way. He didn't bring in the army and do what Franco had to do. Although Franco was justified in doing what he did, he was very, very, very justified. the communists in Spain were, to say they were reprehensible human beings doesn't even come close to explain what they were, what they did to people, what they did to Catholics, priests, nuns, and so forth. But Salazar is an example. When you look at what he did, he used the process, and it was Masonic. It was infiltrated by the Marxists. It had all the, crazy, wacky communists in there. And he used the process, and he insisted on the kingship of Christ. He had the bishops with him, but he insisted on the kingship of Christ. Maurice Duplessis, who was very much like a Salazar, but in Quebec, which I know it's a province, but Quebec has historically in Canada basically been its own country. And under Duplessis, the liberals of our day, they call it la noirceur, which means the darkening or the darkness. But it's the same reason they call the period of genocide and regicide in France, they call that the Enlightenment, when really it's the darkening. It should be called la noirceur. They always, the devil is a liar. He calls things opposite. The liberals are demonic, so they call things by their wrong name. But the period under Duplessis in Quebec was wonderful. Nothing's perfect, obviously, with human beings, but it was very ultramontane in the truest sense of the word, that the church was the prime level of authority, the primacy, and the society was ordered in a Catholic way, and Catholicism was the religion officially of the province and so forth. And they had a period of stability, even prosperity in many cases. And it was really only with the advent of Justin Trudeau's father, Pierre Trudeau, and another fella, I forget his name, they were Marxists, and they started something called Le Cité Libre, which was basically a magazine that, it was, before there was internet, you had pamphlets and magazines, and they basically spread communist propaganda, separatist propaganda. And it was combined with the Second Vatican Council, basically made the downfall of Quebec society, and now it's a sham of what it once was. It's a parody of itself. It's no different than the United States in culture. They just happen to speak French. It's been to their great detriment. They have a declining birth rate and so forth. They used to have 10 kids per family. Anyway, it's the kingship of Christ that is the thing that's going to save your nation. It's the reason they went after Kaiser Karl of Austria. They had to destroy the last vestige of the Holy Roman Empire, because the Holy Roman Empire was the bulwark against the New World Order, because it was Christ who was king, not the state. I don't know how you're going to do it. The bishops have to do something about it, otherwise it likely won't work. But at least on the basic level of your personal life, I would recommend to make sense of what's happening and to have any hope for the future of how to reestablish America, or establish anew, in a sense, with the kingship of Christ. And again, we're just speaking in the hypothetical here. You have to pick up works by, for example, Father Fahey. You got to read Father Fahey. Go pick up any of his works. Loretto Publications publishes his work. Go storm Loretto Publications website. And, if you're watching this, I hope that so many people, I don't make a dime off of this, by the way. I hope so many people go to their website and buy books from them that it crashes their site. I mean that. Like, you really got to go storm, not that I want their site to crash, but you know what I mean. Go storm Loretto Publications and buy Father Fahey's books. Go buy Father Fahey's books and you will understand what's going on with the problem. And you need the kingship of Christ. And you have to understand who your enemies are. And there's a reason why the powers that be behind the Daily Wire, if you catch my drift, there's a reason why they went after Candace Owens when she said Christ is king. Father Fahey explains why that is. Not just conspiracy, but real historical information. Real theological information. Only then will you be able to have some sort of solution. Personally, I do believe that this will actually basically make Trump win. I could be wrong. They could rig. Can you say rig on YouTube? They could do something to make it difficult for him to win. Let's put it that way. But I actually think, I don't know. I think it would be hard to do the same thing that they did last time, because you can kind of do one thing one time and you get wind of it, you can't do it again. I don't know what they'll do this time. But I do think if the mega folks, if they have awareness of this, which they probably do, I mean, they know more about it than I do. I think they'll have a way of getting a pretty big victory this year, if I'm being honest. Nonetheless, even if they don't, it's still not the solution. The solution is the Kingship of Christ. So pick up the books by Father Fahey. Christ is King, and that is the only solution. All right, as always, let me know what you think in the comments. This has been the Kennedy Report. Till next time, God bless you all.